Hey everyone, Anark here, and this is going to be the first in a new series of videos that I'm doing, which, I don't know, I guess I'm going to call Anark Responds, where I just sit down and talk to the camera, kind of like I did with Anark Abridged, but this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to look through comments on my previous videos and I'm going to respond to them here in this video form. I think that this will probably provide a lot of interesting content for the channel. May also, hopefully, make people feel as if I'm engaging with their comments, really thinking about the things they have to say. And I don't really plan on looking at the comments ahead of time, or I should say not trying to figure out like a rebuttal or a response ahead of time, but really kind of live react, as they say. That being said, of course, I have probably seen just about every comment that is made on the channel. I do look at the comments as they're coming in. I read every comment that y'all make. So I have seen these before. I did have a tiny bit of preparation, but I didn't sit down and prepare some rebuttal beforehand. I'm definitely going to be just kind of looking through these and looking for points of contention, people who disagree, or perhaps interesting comments that people have made, and then I will comment on them. So hopefully that is interesting to you, and if it is, stick around. This video in particular, I decided I'm going to start with "The state is counter-revolutionary." Now, for those of you who may be relatively new to the channel, those of you who you probably got here through the Anark Abridged videos that I've been creating, you may not know that I've done a big series of video essays, which I would like to plug now. Go look at the video essays I've produced on this channel, as those are really the, in my mind, my primary focus on this channel. At all times, I'm always producing the next really big video essay. Well, one of the first big video essays that I produced was a 4-part series called "The State is Counter-Revolutionary," which was an inspection of the theory of the state from an anarchist perspective, and then an analysis of the USSR and Maoist China in the revolutionary periods. Then at the very end, part 4 was me sort of returning to the original analysis, talking about how I'd been vindicated. And if that interests you, you should go over there and watch that. This series of videos, "The State is Counter-Revolutionary," have been influential for a lot of people, I'm told. It's the one that when people come to my channel, they tell me that they enjoyed and learned from the most of any of the videos that I've produced. So with that in mind, given the description that I just gave there, you can imagine that, this series of videos was probably not very well received by people who were, had more authoritarian left leanings. So there are plenty of critical comments down beneath. Some of them I've actually already responded to, but I'm going to kind of maybe respond more or less at length here. So you may be wondering why I've been sitting to the side this whole time. That's not usual for me. Well, it's because look at this. We got the whole picture-in-picture thing. Wow, it's so fancy. So fancy. Incredible. Well, let's have a scroll down through these. Oh yeah, we got all that in the way first. Oh, there we go. Now we're to the comments. Gotcha. So let's see here. Yeah, I mean, right off the bat, this person's saying, I like you breaking it down in terms of the process and function of the state conflicting with the end goals of socialism. Idealism gets thrown at anarchist theory a lot, but I feel this argument highlights that the state being a repressive instrument against the proletariat is the result of its very function and historical role. Yeah, that's exactly what I was aiming for in this video series. I am not an idealist, so I was definitely trying to take a more materialist interpretation or a materialist analysis of what was taking place there. But the anarchist materialist analysis is always based around how power is distributed, not just on economics. So it's about how power writ large functions. So this video series, it might be understood as an anarchist power analysis. And so that means that it contains some economic analysis and some analysis of the bureaucracy of the USSR and Maoist China. This is a comment on the first part, however. The first part, I don't go into either the USSR or Maoist China. I'm just talking about kind of writ large, broadly, what the anarchist analysis of the state is in this part. But yeah, that was very intentional. That my critique would sound nothing like idealism, quote unquote. So there's a few I definitely want to get to here. So here's a critical comment. This critical comment says, wait, how did that follow? You first mention how the masses are powerful and thus a threat to the state, and then you say in an aside that in addition to following its own interests, the state will also act in the interests of the most powerful agents. You use that for syllogism to say that the state will always betray the workers. But wouldn't the state, this just goes ... I don't know, perhaps this never got finished, but as I point out here, the masses are not the state. So that's the reason. I mean, that's kind of foundational and fundamental to the analysis in this video. The reason why the state is counter-revolutionary, as we see in parts 2 and 3, and conclude in part 4, is precisely because the masses of people aren't in control of the state. The state itself is a centralized mechanism for holding power, and also holds the ability to dominate the subjects over which it rules. And for that reason, it will always act as a force of suppression against the workers. So, yeah, let's see. I'm looking for some of the more detailed ones. Some of these are a little too specific. Some of you may not have watched the video, so this may be, difficult to contextualize. This person, for example, actually gave, I think, very substantive critiques. I don't agree with the critiques that they've made, and I kind of explained why I disagree with their critiques in the comments in a variety of other places. But I just want to note that I think at least this person had interesting points, or was I'll say this, they were approaching it in good faith. That's what I would say. I think that they were trying to make points understanding what I was saying. I just think that sometimes they didn't really understand what I was saying. Here we have another one, which the fundamental mistake that they're making, and this is that same person, is that they are imagining there is such a thing as a workers' state. So I'll read it. I think the assumption that every power presupposes some form of human slavery is not generally correct. It depends on which class interest the state is built on. So right off the bat, they've made the mistake of thinking that a state can be built on the class interests of anything but a narrow group of rulers. If it were to be focused on the needs of the masses, it would cease to be a state. That would actually cease its fundamental function, and therefore it would no longer be a state. And this is literally the point of the video here. So this person is a Trotskyist. Obviously, they don't agree with that, but that's kind of what most of this person's comments boil down to. If the ruling class is a minority, like in most societies, it is true. However, if the ruling class is the clear majority, as in a worker state, it is not necessarily true. In this case, the state can be controlled by the masses. Lenin had written in The State and Revolution how this can work. Yeah, I think that this reliance on Lenin's State and Revolution is to me a hallmark of the authoritarian left, insofar as that they really view anything that Lenin said in State and Revolution as some sort of like gospel, almost like the only thing that can be legitimated alongside Marx. And I find this very odd for Trotskyists to do, given that Lenin was very, against Trotsky in that sense. There was a lot of internal machinations wherein Lenin and Stalin really sided against Trotsky in those internal political affairs. But that being said, a lot of Trotskyites are very devoted to Lenin. And that's unfortunate, because I don't think that Lenin had a lot of value to really add to the revolutionary process. If anything, I see Lenin as having been a co-opter. I think Lenin did probably more damage to proletarian revolutionary struggle than almost any other single thinker, because he convinced so many people that were actually struggling for their liberation to instead struggle to empower a new class of bourgeois exploiters, but instead a national bourgeois. So that's very unfortunate. This person then repeats the common misconception that the reason everything went wrong was just the Russian Civil War. If it were the case that the Russian Civil War were the reason why that the USSR had concentrated so much power in the hands of the state, then clearly as soon as the Civil War had ended, we should have expected to see that power devolve back into the workers' councils. However, there is no known example of power devolving away from the state after the state has taken power away from the workers. The only one I can really think of is perhaps like Chile. And to be fair, it did have some substantial movement in that direction. Perhaps Tito's Yugoslavia has some kind of claim to it, but it's very unusual to me that anyone who thinks that is a very key focus, that the state will somehow give power back to the workers, ever focuses on the USSR or China as examples. Those are counter examples, if anything. And what they should be probably focusing on is examples like Chile and Yugoslavia. In both examples, of course, we can see that neither in Chile nor Yugoslavia did that really end up really devolving back into, workers having control. But at least those are examples where a partial transformation in that direction took place. So yeah, the concept that, state capitalism or state concentration of capital is necessary as a siege response is a false premise. It's based on the idea that the state will ever stop that siege response, that it will ever return to worker control, if it ever even had it to begin with. In most examples, it didn't. Yeah, so, and then they repeat talking points about the fact that the Russian Civil War and the backwardsness and isolation of the country was the problem. In fact, the Russian peasantry was extremely forward-thinking. They were considered some of the most advanced peasantry in all of Europe. Marx himself, once he read reports of how radicalized the Russian peasantry was, changed his mind about the radical capabilities or potentials of the Russian peasantry. So, in fact, the radicalness of the Russian peasantry was not at all an impediment to revolutionary success. If anything, it would have been a very important factor to Russia actually succeeding in carrying out a broader revolutionary struggle. I think one of the tragedies of Russia is precisely that it really had everything in its favor to succeed. It had an incredibly powerful proletarian working class in the urban centers, and it also had an extremely radicalized, even communized Russian peasantry. And the peasantry just didn't want to be domineered by a distant state apparatus, and they were villainized for that fact. And as we all know, the Russian urban proletariat was actually very, very radical. They carried out a mass revolution mostly from the bottom up until it was co-opted. So, yeah, and they then also repeat the idea that you have to be a quote-unquote big advanced country, which is, of course, just disproved by all known example. The most advanced countries tend to be the ones with the least revolutionary outcome, not to be like a third worldist or something here, but there is absolutely no there's no viability to the claim that you have to have become an extremely advanced country to undergo a complete revolution. In fact, it looks quite the opposite, that is really an impediment, and that amounts to capitalist development, not socialist development. And capitalist development does not just transform into socialist development. So this person, I think, once again, they're responding in good faith, but they have outdated theory that is disproved by the examples of history. And then, you can see me kind of saying some of this here. There's never been a state wherein the working majority controls the government, and there never will be, because the state is inherently a power concentrating apparatus. It doesn't matter what country you try it in, it will only ever act to disempower the masses of workers. I can see why this is getting truncated here, and it's because I have the window sized in a particular way. That'll have to be fixed perhaps in the next iteration of this video, but for now, I am just going to continue live reacting. And then you can see them kind of bearing forth on that. Yeah, and then we have probably the most common criticism of any that I receive on this channel, especially, for my video essays at least, and that is, personally, the music in the background is very distracting. Yes, you and many, many other people, I have really had an issue at various points in making these video essays, keeping the music to the right sound levels and somehow managing to keep those audible so that you can hear the music, but not so loud that it distracts you from my voiceover. So that's been a mistake I've made in a lot of videos. In fact, probably if this series continues on, you're going to see that one repeat a lot. It's almost a meme for me personally at this point. And that's not to say that you're not right. I think that's probably just kind of a mistake on my part as a creator, is that I have not gotten very good at fixing that. However, I think in my latest videos, perhaps the last like 2, I have gotten better at that aspect. And so hopefully that is better moving into the future. Last thing I want to say on that subject is just that if that's you, if you've tried to listen to my video essays and you find the music distracting, like this person, like many others, number one, most of my video essays, the audio for the video essays, is hosted on Spotify, and you can find that link in the description to those videos. Okay, so if you just want to go and listen to a version of it where it's just my voiceover, no video and no music, those are all up on Spotify. Yes, Anark is on Spotify. Number 2, many of my video essays are also in text form, so if you want to go find them, you can find them on the Anarchist library, or in the case of A Modern Anarchism Parts 1 and 2, those are up on libcom. So that may be informative for a bunch of you who are listening. So then here's the same person. This person's going to be probably featuring a lot because here we are doing a response to comments for "The state is counter-revolutionary." And they're making at least a decent point to begin with here, and that is you can't draw a scientific conclusion from a single experiment, especially if it was in conditions that won't repeat. It's like knowing only the French Revolution and concluding that bourgeois democracy always fails, but later it did work. Yeah, and then kind of what I point out here, and I'll kind of reiterate a little bit, is all the experiments show the same thing. Like the USSR and Maoist China and so on. These aren't our only examples. Every example shows the same thing. The state never is a worker state. So we have lots of examples. As I say, the state is a force of sabotage against worker control. There's never been a single counterexample in all attempts that have ever been made. The series merely lays out 2 of these examples. And then, yeah, anyway, so let's see here. Let's move on to somebody else's comments. This person says, notes from watching this video. I remember reading this one. 1, talking about failed revolutions as an anarchist is both condescending and, to be honest, pretty laughable. That's a pretty funny comment, given that that's an extremely condescending thing to say. Nonetheless, I contend it's the truth. They are failed revolutions. Or I suppose they are successful bourgeois revolutions, but they were failed proletarian revolutions. 16 minutes in talking about the state, and never do we get its actual function. No, I give its function. You just disagree. Meaning advocating for the interest of the class that has ownership over the means of production. No, the state is an apparatus of control. And yes, of course, the class that controls it is going to be utilizing it in that sense. But it is a bureaucratic machine. It is part of a broader machine. And it it is joined with the rest of the machine, yes, and therefore obviously the ruling class is going to have extreme control over it, but that's not really relevant to this particular description here. This is instead a description of what the state is, rather than its role of subservience to in a power dynamic to a particular class. So, yeah, that's a more scientific way of describing it, which is to say we're talking about its actual power dynamics, not its relational dynamic to another thing. That's not to say we don't care about those relational dynamics. They're absolutely valid, but they're not, I think, the key here. And it's part of the reason why the anarchist definition of the state is one that precludes the possibility of a state that is fully controlled by the people. So I think this person kind of just failed to understand the analysis. 3, the use of the word authoritarian should, in all honesty, remain only in the vocabulary of baby leftists. Wow, this is definitely one of those angles on authority moments. We can see where this person's going. The creator doesn't strike me as one. Yeah, no, definitely not. Probably been doing this a little bit longer than you have, in fact. Therefore, such an idealistic characterization, not materialist at least, is pretty cringe in my eyes. Then asterisk replaced with mistaken, false, etc. Very, very odd attempt at a criticism. I don't think this really had any substance here. I disagree. I think the word authoritarian very much does have meaning. In fact, I've continued to flesh out the meaning of the word authoritarian further and further in my work. Should be said, I don't recall, to their credit, whether I defined authoritarianism in this part 1, or part 4 of this video series, but I do in fact define what I mean by authoritarianism, and that is essentially the monopolization of the flows of power in society. So the more monopolization of the flows of power broadly, the more authoritarianism is taking place. And if you look at any given power and you look at the amount of monopolization or gatekeeping or narrow centralized control over that power in society, that is an increase in the measure of authoritarianism as that is concentrated more and more. So no, authoritarianism does in fact have a meaning, and in fact it has meaning in many contexts. Many different authoritarianism has been used in a variety of ways. Sometimes it just is to explain a sort of totalitarian, dictatorial regime of existence. But this idea that we can't use the word authoritarian or that it has no meaning is in fact, in my opinion, the hallmark of a baby leftist. Probably somebody who's told to read On Authority and has just been exposed to authoritarian left ideology like Lenin and Stalin, and they're just stuck in a little echo chamber where everybody tells them the word authoritarianism has no meaning. And the reason why they're telling themselves that and telling each other that is because they support authoritarianism. So they want to pretend that this word has no meaning. Somebody who is an authoritarian would prefer that you just didn't even have a word to refer to what they were advocating. So that's precisely what they're doing. They're trying to broaden the means of people who make this argument is they're trying to broaden out the meaning of the word authoritarianism until it becomes meaningless. But that was only by their own doing. They are the ones that redefined the word authoritarianism in that sense so that it purposely didn't have a meaning. But authoritarianism can have a meaning in many contexts. 4, the use of the word dictatorship to refer to the rule of a dictator as if it is not used in the sense of the one that places the dictates. This is at least a little more valid. I mean, I think I get what they're saying. And it's true that the word dictatorship is definitely rooting to that fact, this concept of who dictates, right? And it's also true to say that I suppose this broadly in Marxist literature does not mean like an actual dictator in control. The dictatorship of the proletariat is not actually supposed to be a dictatorship. It's supposed to be actually where the workers have rulership. And the connotation of dictatorship historically, I would say really before, the authoritarian revolutions, is that dictatorship was kind of like an emergency state of existence wherein things had to be done very quickly and you just empowered some person and I do mean some person, to make emergency decisions, to dictate outcomes very quickly. And our most notable examples are ancient Greece and Rome. And in these occasions, we see where the root of the understanding for thousands of years of this word dictatorship came from. However, I will concede that Marx is not using it this way. And then I don't know. Some of these are so contextual. Of course, I'm not going to be able to know what they're referring to. Okay. They say all in all for anarchist standards, with no material analysis, that is. I like how the first thing they did was accuse me of being condescending. And then this is the most condescending comments they could have made. It was a 7 out of 10. Wow. Well, thank you for the 7 out of 10. I appreciate that. I mean, legitimately, though, perhaps I sound like I'm being snarky, but that's kind of you to at least be open enough to this conflicting information to have rated this video a 7 out of 10, even when you clearly disagree with it so much. It was an enjoyable video, they say. Of course, that would be much lower if we had to analyze the millions I expect for the second part, the grade to fall as a result. I think what they're saying is they think that I'm going to be like, millions dead, Stalin killed all the people. But they'll, of course, find that's not the case. It's not what happens in part 2. Points would be excluded, especially when Nazi propaganda is used. Yeah, well, there's no Nazi propaganda in any of my work, so no worries there. And then of course there's this weird little extra. Looking at the comments, I got to say I was not surprised to find such a close relationship between this and Vosh's channel. The great revolutionary front between the anarchists and US-based social democrats at best that support Israel and imperialism. Looking forward to part 2. All right. Wow. Okay. Well, that was something. Oh, and then I think this is worth pointing out here. This is actually, I think, somebody who is like a fan of the channel, but is actually making a criticism, and that is just a tiny comment here. Berkman, in fact, did not go back to the USA. He'd been deported for trying to assassinate a capitalist. He committed suicide in Western Europe a decade later. Actually, until just reading this comment, I did not know that. And I'm not perfect. I don't know everything. I hope that's not a shock to everybody listening. But I did not know he committed suicide in Western Europe. So yes, that is a mistake that is in the video. I do say that Berkman returned. If he had returned, it would have been in order to continue to fight for socialism. That's not weird at all. Anark made a mistake there. And then they say, also read The Dawn of Everything by David Graeber and David Wengrow. Yeah. This one is they say, I swear, MLs, MLMs, and anarchists are all talking and wanting the same. The more I watch people of these camps, the more I get convinced of that. Yet, we still fight and bicker instead of communicating and learning. I don't want to be insulting, but I disagree. I do not think that we all want the same thing. I think not only do we have very different methods for achieving what it is that we want to achieve, but I talk to a lot of authoritarian leftists who don't even seem to want communism. That is to say, they don't even want a stateless, classless, moneyless society wherein all distribution is from each according to their ability to each according to their need. It doesn't even seem like a lot of them actually want that. Some of them seem like they actually don't even believe that's possible. And I also should note we're coming up on 29 minutes, but I'm just going to keep on going here. I'll probably go a little bit longer on these. I'm not going to set them to 30 minutes. As far as I can see, React videos just tend to go long, so I'll go long. But I'll respond more substantively here. I think the mistake a lot of people make is that, and this is not, I don't know if this person is new to leftism or not, but when a lot of people are new to leftism, they look around and it seems like everybody's kind of saying the same things, but they've got kind of like these little nuance differences. And it's easy to think that because it seems like we're all advocating for, some particular future, which, often it's like communism, but socialism or something of that sort. However, when you dig down into the details is when you discover that that isn't true. And it requires a lot of study, and it requires a study of both history, of interaction with those that are around you, and really trying to delineate, details of their beliefs, and also reading theory, in which case you will begin to recognize there are, in fact, very large differences, such that it actually makes a lot of sense that if you were Stalin, or if you were Lenin, or if you were the head of any of these big, authoritarian left nations, that you would actually want to suppress and destroy the anarchists. It actually makes sense. The anarchists definitely want something different in the short term and have very different methods for getting it. It's easy to see how the authoritarian left can view anarchists as threats, because they want to create an authoritarian state that devolves into capitalism, and anarchists don't. I know they don't think that it's going to devolve into capitalism, but that's irrelevant. It does devolve into capitalism. So because anarchists recognize that they are creating something that will devolve into capitalism, then anarchists are going to be in opposition to them, and that appears to them as a threat. So this is not something we should ever expect to change. There's never going to be a future where if state leftists get control of the state, they are just going to cooperate and be friends with anarchists, because anarchists will always be a threat to their state and their continued upholding of capitalism. Here's another errata. They say you should have noted that Gotha Critique was published post-mortem, as Marx was dead by 1891. Yeah. I'm not sure if I make a specific remark about... Oh, I see. They're saying because then people couldn't have necessarily responded to it and taken it into consideration. Yeah, that's a good point. So it's possible that the fact that, people may not have been able to respond to it. But no, 1891. Yeah, everybody involved in the video had already was operating far after 1891. So not sure if this is a relevant errata here. One reason for the authoritarianism was also the failure of the revolution in Germany. This person kind of gives one good rebuttal to that, and that is authoritarianism was the rule a year prior to the attempted German Revolution. So that does make a lot of sense on that front. The cause of authoritarianism is the ideology of Bolshevism. Bolshevism and Leninism are authoritarian ideologies. Yeah, I would also note that I really don't give a lot of leeway to these sorts of excuses. I think that it's a very bad idea to give excuses to the, state regimes, which are constantly looking for excuses to expand domination and control. Giving them more excuses. Oh, it's because Germany did blah, blah, blah. And oh, it's because the Russian peasantry wasn't advanced enough. And, it's because, we hadn't eliminated bourgeois reaction, and all these things are excuses. The state, and specifically the Bolsheviks, had all the power in the world. They could have reformed society into a new society. They're always making jokes about pressing the communism button, but no, they absolutely could have utterly transformed the state of Russia at that time. They had their hands on the levers. Think about the fact that the C&T FAI established something very near to real communism in the countrysides within a few months. And you're telling me that somehow the USSR is incapable of doing it with complete control over the flows of power and domination? This is just nonsensical. It's a false talking point. It makes no sense. What they might want to try to say instead is that it would have been very tumultuous. It would have been a radical transformation, and it would have required them to undermine the power of the Russian state, which they were not willing to do, of course. Yeah, and then, anyway, back and forth, some stuff doesn't matter. The argument goes as follows. Holiday ad plays. Yeah, some people complain that there are ads on the videos. The ads on the videos are a pretty minor source of income for me. but they are a source of income. I think that if a time came when the Patreon grew to the degree where I could, just completely sustain myself off of just the Patreon income, I would be happy to turn the ads off completely. But I'm not there yet. I'm really trying to cobble together a bunch of small income flows in order to stay afloat right now. And it kind of gets my attention focused in a lot of different directions. And so even though I know y'all probably are kind of annoyed by the ads, they are still a source of income for me. Not a large one, but one that kind of matters because I really don't have a lot of money. I'm pretty broke. So, if you want to see the ads be taken off the channel, then please go become a patron at my Patreon, which is patreon.com/Anark. Every single person who becomes a patron helps me enormously. And I guess I'll note, because it's kind of relevant here, this is one of the first months that I've seen a drop in my patrons in a while, which is, pretty discouraging. But I know that a lot of people who do the kind of work I'm doing, content creators of all sorts, have also seen a drop in income. I think people are on hard times. So if you can't, I understand. But if you can, please see this as an opportunity to go over there to my Patreon and become a patron. And then here, you know what? We got a person saying the exact opposite, really like the music in the background. See, this is kind of funny because this also happens on like every single video. Every single video, I get some people telling me the music is intolerable and is so loud I can't stand it. And then I get another group of people that are like, love the music. It was wonderful. The music made it for me. Good choice. So, kind of hard to come to conclusions sometimes. I get real mixed messages on the music in these videos, but I definitely took to heart that I should probably make it a little quieter after, this video is from a while back. You can see that's from 3 years ago. Yeah, this person asks, can you clarify what you mean by the latent power of the people? And I just note that you should probably watch Power, my video Power, if you're interested in that. There I really clarify what I mean by power and how power functions. I kind of create a anarchist power analysis for the modern era. And you might even see the essay if you're kind of trying to figure out how to get into the more theoretical works I've produced. I often recommend people just start with my video essay, Power. Power is, I would say, kind of an intermediary level essay on power, and it will probably give you a good understanding of what I mean by power and how I think power functions in the rest of my work. So Power is actually a really great video to start on, but I also want to note, damn, the music be loud at some parts in that video, so brace yourself for that one. This person asks, okay, in the video I say that there are quibbles between different anarchist theorists on the meaning of government and the state. And they ask, where can I find those quibbles? And I basically say, well, Kropotkin talks about it in The State, Its Historic Role, and Malatesta at the beginning of Anarchy. So, there I've got Vosh actually commenting on that video. He actually, I forgot he said something on this one. So yeah, we're kind of coming. Yeah, it looks like that's the end of the comments for part 1 of The State is Counter-Revolutionary. I'm not sure if every one of these videos will be formatted where I kind of just go from the beginning to the end of the comments. That seems like it might be a little bit unwieldy, but here I think that's probably a good place for us to stop. I hope you enjoyed this. This is kind of a new type of video I'm thinking about doing. I haven't really decided what my schedule is going to be. I think I'm going to continue doing Anark abridged videos. My current conception of what I'm going to do is I'm going to alternate them. I'm going to have Anark abridged 1 week, then the next week I'm going to do Anark responds, and then I'll alternate back and forth, back and forth. Tell me what you think. If you like this video, if you thought this was interesting, please tell me so in the comments. If you think that I should continue doing videos like this, or if there's any like comments or critiques about how I've approached this, please tell me in the comments. Also, if you liked the video, obviously click like. If you disliked it, click dislike. That's totally fine. I also want to say, if you like the videos I'm producing on this channel, if you find what I've said here insightful, if you want to help me continue producing these videos and as well as the bigger video essays, please subscribe to the channel. And if you really appreciate the work I'm doing here, go over to my Patreon and become a patron. Last, if you're stuck around this long, you must be truly interested in what I've got to say. I mean, most people would have already clicked away. I think I would have clicked away as soon as people started talking about subscribing and liking and stuff. But I want to say the next big video essay, A Modern Anarchism Part 3 Revolution, is extremely close to being finished. I expect to have it done in the next week. My deadline for myself is the 22nd, and that may be when it gets released. I hope to actually release it earlier than that, but it will come out in those, just in that kind of those surrounding days. So expect to see it somewhere in like the range between like the 21st and like the 23rd or something. That video essay has been an enormous amount of work. It has taken me a year to produce. I had hoped that it wasn't going to take me that long, but it has been an enormous effort, and it has been one of the biggest exertions of my my energies and of all of my mental and intellectual stimulus for the last like year have gone into producing this work and really writing something that I thought was important and impactful and that it was of use to revolutionaries in understanding and analyzing the world around them. So I hope you're excited for it, because I am so excited to release it. And if you want to keep helping me produce those videos, once again, just go become a patron at my Patreon, which is patreon.com/Anark. But anyway, I will not bore you with any more of that. That is it for this video today, and I'll see y'all next time.